The anguished plea of a Russian citizen from the Siberian city of Tyumen lays bare a chilling reality. The digital and economic lifeblood of a modern Russian metropolis has been brutally severed. Make no mistake, this wasn't a sophisticated cyber attack nor a mere technical malfunction. This was a deliberate digital civil war ignited by the Kremlin and waged directly against its own populace. Driven by palpable fear of widespread panic ignited by Ukraine's relentless deep drone attacks, Putin's regime resorted to an extreme measure, severing mobile internet access across Russia's key urban centers. Across a colossal expanse stretching from Sverdlovsk to Kurgan and from Tyumen all the way to Murmansk, the ominous service unavailable message didn't just transform smartphones into useless bricks. It simultaneously paralyzed point-of-sale devices in bustling stores, rendered bank ATMs defunct, and crippled Yandex terminals in taxis, bringing local commerce to an abrupt grinding halt. This alarming digital shutdown quickly spiraled into a parallel physical collapse, establishing a chilling new normal that transcends mere isolated incidents. Just consider the dire parallels: tens of thousands of residents shivering in the Moscow suburb of Podolsk as heating pipes ruptured in brutal -20-degree temperatures, or the hundreds of thousands plunged into sudden darkness when the Luch thermal power plant in Belgorod ceased operations following Ukrainian strikes. The stark reality is this: the regime has demonstrably lost its ability to uphold even its most fundamental commitments to its citizens. So precisely how was this unprecedented digital blackout orchestrated? This wasn't merely a fortuitous fiber optic cable failure. This was a meticulously executed military protocol conceived at the highest echelons of state power and ruthlessly imposed upon civilian infrastructure. The operation commenced with an urgent directive issued by Roskomnadzor, Russia's notorious digital censorship agency, effectively the Internet's executioner, to the nation's big four mobile operators MTS, Megafon, Beeline, and Tele2. This directive explicitly mandated the immediate suspension of mobile data traffic, even impacting cities situated thousands of kilometers from Ukraine. The stated justification elements threatening national security conveniently encompassing everything from drone incursions to viral videos depicting civilian panic. This technical shutdown isn't a spur-of-the-moment act. It's a critical component of a meticulously crafted scenario that the Kremlin has been developing for many years. Far from a simple flick of a switch, this maneuver represents a highly sophisticated digital choking operation. The execution involved Russia's formidable Deep Packet Inspection or DPI system, a nationwide infrastructure designed to relentlessly monitor, aggressively filter, and deliberately throttle all internet traffic. Crucially, DPI hardware was mandated for all internet service providers under the 2019 Sovereign Internet Law, solidifying state control. Leveraging these omnipresent systems, operators either completely blacked out specific internet protocols, notably popular social media platforms like Telegram, WhatsApp, and YouTube, or effectively crippled them by intentionally slowing down data, a tactic ominously known as throttling. The full implications of this technical strangulation became terrifyingly apparent when compounded by yet another significant outage on January 30, 2024. On that fateful day, a severe malfunction within the technical backbone responsible for the .ru domain name effectively pulled the plug on Russia's entire national internet infrastructure. The Moscow Times meticulously reported that major domestic platforms such as Yandex, Sberbank, and VKontakte were rendered completely inaccessible for several hours. Regardless of whether it was a deliberate test or an accidental mishap, this incident starkly exposed the alarming fragility of Russia's digital infrastructure, revealing how a single point of failure can unilaterally cripple the nation's civilian economy. The calculated outages in Tyumen and Sverdlovsk were clear examples of this very fragility being weaponized. However, this unfolding crisis isn't confined to the digital realm. It has profoundly manifested in the physical world as well. Russia's domestic front is facing a relentless assault from two distinct directions: externally by persistent Ukrainian attacks, and internally by the insidious creep of systemic decay. The external onslaught offers visceral, undeniable proof that the war is coming home to Russia. Ukraine's increasingly accurate strikes on vital civilian infrastructure, such as the Luch thermal power plant in Belgorod, are systematically plunging entire cities into profound darkness. Even Belgorod Governor Gladkov was forced to publicly acknowledge the extensive power outages that followed these damaging attacks. The Kremlin's knee-jerk reaction to these attacks reveals a chilling priority, less about bolstering air defenses and more about severing internet access to stifle the dissemination of news and suppress images of civilian panic. The internal decay, however, is arguably even more disgraceful, highlighting the profound inadequacy of Russia's own domestic systems. The catastrophic heating crisis in Podolsk, a suburb near Moscow, was not the consequence of a drone strike. It exposed tens of thousands of citizens freezing in bone-chilling -20-degree weather, a direct result of decades of endemic corruption, chronic neglect, and the ruthless diversion of vital resources to the front lines of the war. As its own people shivered, local authorities' immediate response was predictably to suppress any information and preemptively quash potential public protests. Thus, whether facing a Ukrainian drone or missile, or simply the ramifications of its own neglect, when the nation's infrastructure falters, the Kremlin's ingrained first reflex is to immediately flip the digital switch, attempting to bury the inconvenient truth. This is a truly painful admission, revealing a regime that has entirely lost its ability to solve real-world problems, retaining only the chilling capacity to suppress any public awareness of those problems. Today's sweeping digital blackout in Tyumen is anything but a hasty, panicked overnight decision. It is the deliberate activation of a digital Iron Curtain mechanism, a sophisticated apparatus, meticulously assembled and refined over many years. The comprehensive legal, technical, and strategic architecture underpinning this systemic collapse was meticulously constructed across 3 distinct phases long before the first shot of the war was even fired. The inaugural component of this digital guillotine was put into place in 2019 with the enactment of the so-called Sovereign Internet Law, widely known to the public as RUNET. The Kremlin's public narrative for this legislation was framed entirely around a defense doctrine. Its stated purpose was to shield Russia from potential cyber attacks originating from the West, and to guarantee the Russian internet's functional autonomy even if its links to the global network were completely severed. Yet even then, astute independent analysts and numerous civil society organizations unequivocally argued that the law's true intent was not to repel foreign threats, but rather to ruthlessly suppress domestic dissent. Independent sources were quick to highlight the law's most insidious provision. It compelled all Russian internet service providers to funnel their traffic through a singular centralized gateway under the direct and absolute control of Roskomnadzor. What's more, these internet service providers were explicitly mandated to install Deep Packet Inspection (DPI) hardware directly supplied by the state. This critical hardware bestowed upon Roskomnadzor the unprecedented ability to filter, deliberately slow down, or even outright shut down any specific website's applications or entire regions across the nation, all with the literal push of a button. At its inception, this law was widely perceived as a digital guillotine explicitly engineered to preemptively crush any future civil uprising. Today, ironically, this very same guillotine is being deployed to suppress an escalating drone panic. The inaugural real-world test of this digital guillotine didn't unfold on Russian soil, but rather in its loyal satellite state neighboring Belarus. In the summer of 2020, as widespread protests erupted across Belarus against Alexander Lukashenko, following accusations of fraudulent election results, the Kremlin swiftly activated this meticulously crafted playbook. Lukashenko proceeded to implement exactly what RUNET was designed for. He systematically blocked protesters from coordinating through Telegram and other encrypted platforms. For days, he effectively shut down or rendered the internet completely unusable across the entire nation. This drastic measure was in essence a targeted choke operation, expertly executed using the very DPI technology Russia had supplied. While this temporarily hindered the organization of protests, its long-term consequence was to starkly expose the regime's profound impotence and its abject fear of its own populace to the entire world. Putin and the entire security apparatus within the Kremlin observed this unfolding situation with intense scrutiny. For them, it served as an invaluable live laboratory experiment, meticulously testing the effectiveness, or rather the limitations, of the RUNET infrastructure when deployed against widespread civil disobedience. The Belarus playbook delivered a clear, chilling lesson to the Kremlin. Sacrificing the entire civilian economy to quell civil chaos was deemed an entirely acceptable price to pay for maintaining control. Now let's fast forward to 2023. When the very first Ukrainian drones penetrated Moscow's airspace, the regime's digital weapon was unleashed once more, albeit with a subtly different tactical approach. The regime's immediate countermeasure wasn't a full internet shutdown, but rather a widespread GPS spoofing operation or deliberate deception. Every single civilian GPS signal across Moscow's skies was systematically jammed, with all location data cunningly rerouted to either Vnukovo or Domodedovo airports. Forbes, among other publications, promptly reported that this unprecedented maneuver plunged Moscow into utter civilian chaos. The primary objective was to incapacitate civilian navigation-reliant drones, yet it proved largely ineffective against military-grade Ukrainian drones, which employed far more sophisticated systems like inertial navigation for guidance. So who exactly bore the brunt of this GPS spoofing operation? It indiscriminately impacted Moscow's taxi drivers, Yandex couriers, vital food delivery services, and millions of ordinary citizens who depended on precise navigation. This marked the initial direct economic damage inflicted by the regime's paranoia upon its own civilian populace, chillingly foreshadowing the total blackouts we see today. When the widespread GPS spoofing ultimately failed to deter the drones, the regime was left with only one desperate recourse: a complete digital blackout, a tactic rigorously field-tested in Belarus in 2020 and formalized by Runet legislation in 2019. The current outage gripping Tyumen is therefore the bitter and predictable fruit of this prolonged, insidious preparatory process. The digital kill switch activated by the Kremlin in a frantic attempt to halt incoming drones unleashed a cascading domino effect, effectively shattering the very backbone of Russian civilian life and its economy. The sheer magnitude of the chaos unleashed by the service unavailable decree starkly highlights a deeply troubling truth. The regime either fundamentally misunderstands how deeply integrated its own society is into the 21st century, or more disturbingly, it simply doesn't care. The repercussions of this engineered chaos quickly became disturbingly evident. The most immediate and profound impact was psychological. For millions of Russians, smartphones aren't just devices. They're the veritable Swiss Army knife of modern existence. Overnight, these indispensable tools were rendered nothing more than inert bricks. Citizens found themselves utterly cut off, unable to contact their families, their children at school, or their spouses at work. Emergency services were unreachable and access to vital news evaporated. This wasn't merely a communication blackout. It was a digital replication of the panic that gripped Moscow's skies, severing the most fundamental safety net of modern society. The plaintive cry of "We are isolated" from Tyumen perfectly encapsulated this agonizing feeling of digital abandonment. In a chilling regression to the 1980s, people were forced to rely on car radios or state-controlled television channels to grasp what was transpiring. This effectively cemented the regime's ironclad monopoly on information, ensuring its propaganda remained utterly unchallenged. The second, and perhaps even more catastrophic consequence, was an undeniable economic collapse. Despite facing stringent international sanctions, Russia had paradoxically evolved into a more cashless society than many Western nations, particularly within its sprawling urban centers. From nearly every grocery store transaction to buying coffee or even a bus ticket, an overwhelming reliance on digital payments had taken root, including systems like the Mir card, which had replaced Apple Pay and Sberbank's popular instant transfer application. When the internet abruptly ceased to function, all these interconnected systems instantly seized up. POS terminals flashed no connection warnings. Yandex apps crashed en masse. Taxi drivers were unable to locate passengers and couriers couldn't receive new orders. The entire civilian economy effectively ground to a standstill. This sudden digital paralysis rapidly escalated into tangible, widespread physical panic. Citizens now distrusting their digital wallets and bank accounts, and with vivid memories of the 1990s economic chaos, desperately surged towards physical cash, viewing it as their sole remaining safe haven. This was undeniably a digital bank run. Those who frantically rushed to ATMs were confronted with two brutal realities. Either the machines were entirely defunct due to the internet outage, or the few that were operational were completely drained of cash within minutes, overwhelmed by unprecedented demand. Shops were compelled to display cash-only signs, yet the vast majority of people had insufficient physical currency, having placed their trust squarely in the digital age. This grim scenario presented the precise financial equivalent of the lengthy queues that snaked outside gas stations during the fuel crisis. Then people waited for gasoline. Now they were queuing simply to access their own money. The fourth far-reaching ripple of this chaos transcended mere civilian inconvenience, directly impacting the intricate realm of logistical choke points. These profound disruptions extended far beyond just Yandex couriers. The entire system of trucking across Russia's vast geography, intricate supply chains, the critical management of supermarket warehouses, and even national railway coordination all rely heavily on seamless mobile data networks and precise GPS for any semblance of operational efficiency. When these vital networks were abruptly severed, the nation's entire logistical backbone either slowed to a crawl or was outright crippled. The Kremlin's desperate maneuver to stop a drone had in fact amounted to nothing less than suffocating its own civilian economy. In an act of profound self-sabotage, the regime willingly condemned its own citizens to hunger, darkness, and destitution, all under the perverse guise of protecting them. This begs a critical question. Why would the Kremlin undertake such extreme measures, knowingly jeopardizing its own economy and plunging its civilian order into disarray? The unsettling answer lies deep within the pervasive paranoia and two deeply entrenched fears that have utterly consumed the regime. These are military fear and a far more potent political fear. Military fear is rooted in Ukraine's startling technological asymmetry and the advanced decay of Russia's once vaunted defense doctrine. Ukraine's increasingly effective long-range drones, including the formidable Luti with ranges spanning hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, have unequivocally exposed the profound inadequacy of Russian air defenses. One by one, critical strategic refineries in Ryazan, Orenburg, and St. Petersburg fell victim to these strikes. Even the once vaunted and supposedly invincible S-400 air defense system has been repeatedly decimated in both Crimea and Belgorod. Russian military strategists are utterly baffled, unable to comprehend how these drones achieve such pinpoint accuracy. This gaping void in understanding has become fertile ground for rampant conspiracy theories and escalating paranoia. One such pervasive fear, potentially dubbed Operation Spiderweb, posits that 4G and 5G signals or GPS pings continuously emitted by Russian civilian mobile phones unwittingly create a detailed digital terrain map for Ukrainian drones, facilitating their navigation or enabling last-second target coordinate confirmation. While this theory remains highly contentious on a technical level, it undeniably offers a far more palatable scapegoat than any logical explanation for a regime consumed by panic. The regime therefore prefers the narrative that our people's phones are inadvertently aiding the enemy rather than conceding the humiliating truth that our air defense is fundamentally inadequate, forcing us to silence those very phones. The second, and arguably far more perilous fear gnawing at the Kremlin is distinctly political: the existential terror of losing its iron grip on information. The regime's deep-seated anxiety isn't primarily about the refinery ablaze in Ryazan. It's about the uncontrolled dissemination of uncensored high-resolution images of that fire, captured on civilian phones, shared virally on Telegram, and amplified by international media. It dreads the angry videos filmed by shivering residents in Podolsk, knowing they will utterly shatter the regime's carefully constructed narrative that everything is under control. Just as in Belgorod, these candid civilian videos provide irrefutable evidence dismantling the regime's wall of illusion and unequivocally proving that the war has indeed come home. The act of severing internet access is a desperate, feeble act of censorship explicitly designed to prevent this damning evidence from reaching the outside world. It's an attempt to stop civilian panic from morphing into organized anger and to desperately conceal the ever-widening cracks in the regime's elaborate wall of propaganda. When the Kremlin resorts to such tactics, it genuinely believes it's securing a short-term tactical advantage. Perhaps it momentarily disrupts a drone signal or prevents a partisan from relaying critical coordinates. And undoubtedly it delays the viral spread of videos depicting public anger in Podolsk or the Belgorod explosion by a few crucial hours. This offers a fleeting few hours of breathing room in the relentless information war, yet the devastating cost incurred on the other side of the scale is nothing short of a strategic catastrophe. When the internet is abruptly severed, you effectively strangle your nation's own digital economy. Banking, logistics, and trade immediately grind to a halt. You systematically erode the last vestiges of your people's trust in the regime watching, as the once sacred promise of stability simply evaporates. In doing so, you openly broadcast your profound vulnerability to the entire world. A genuinely powerful superpower shouldn't be forced to sever its own citizens' internet access over a mere handful of drones. And in a cruel twist of irony, by preventing civilians from accessing vital information, you render them even more exposed and vulnerable to potential dangers. Recall Belgorod's governor candidly admitting to potential glitches in the critical missile threat warning systems. These very systems are also intrinsically linked to the internet. Ergo, severing the internet connection could tragically mean leaving civilians completely unaware of an impending missile strike. Ultimately, cutting off the internet is a self-defeating act akin to burning down your own house to protect it from a thief. The thief might be deterred, but there will be no house left to protect. These simultaneous digital and physical disruptions are not isolated, unrelated crises. They are deeply interconnected threads forming a much larger, more ominous tapestry. This unfolding narrative reveals the brutal shredding of the tacit social contract that Vladimir Putin meticulously cultivated and maintained with the Russian people for a quarter of a century. Putin's own deep-seated paranoia has now, it seems, transformed into the regime's most formidable and destructive adversary. As the Kremlin increasingly falters in its conventional war against Ukraine, it now teeters on the precipice of losing this very digital civil war that it so recklessly initiated against its own citizens. Phones have been rendered useless bricks, and once vibrant cities have become digital prisons. In their desperate attempts to shield themselves from Ukrainian drones, they are unwittingly suffocating their own civilian economy and unraveling their social fabric. The leader who once ascended to power on a promise of unwavering stability is now with his own hands dragging Russia back into the tumultuous chaos reminiscent of the 1990s. This extends beyond mere military defeat. It represents a profound moral and systemic collapse, the self-inflicted destruction of a regime utterly enslaved by its own fear. Ultimately, at the heart of this unfolding tragedy, the true antagonist isn't drones or missiles. It is the utter helplessness of a state that has irrevocably squandered the trust of its own people. As they say, what goes around comes around. What are your thoughts on this unfolding situation? Share your insights in the comments below. If you found this analysis compelling, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth content, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next upload. Thank you for watching.